beneath the golden domes of Topkapi Palace, where the morning call to prayer echoed across Istanbul's ancient walls. Pregnant women once shuffled through shadowed courtyards in iron chains, their swollen bellies, symbols that should have represented hope and the promise of new life, instead marked them as condemned souls trapped in the merciless machinery of Ottoman justice. In the dungeons below, executioners' tools waited with patient malevolence, curved blades gleaming in torchlight, ropes coiled like serpents, and earth-stained shovels that had already witnessed unspeakable horrors. These women faced a choice that defied human comprehension: give birth in chains, or carry their unborn children to the grave. But what they endured went far beyond simple execution. In the sprawling Ottoman Empire, where the Sultan's words served as both earthly law and divine command, pregnancy became not a shield against cruelty, but a weapon wielded by the state itself. To understand how such systematic cruelty could exist, we must descend into the dark heart of the Ottoman legal system. The empire's framework merged Islamic Sharia law with the Sultan's imperial edicts, creating a labyrinth where pregnant women occupied a uniquely vulnerable position. They existed caught between competing interpretations of mercy and justice, where their fate could be sealed with the stroke of a pen. The legal code contained specific provisions for handling pregnant criminals, but these laws were designed to protect the unborn, not the condemned mothers. Religious scholars distinguished between crimes against God himself and those falling under the Sultan's authority. For pregnant women, this distinction meant the difference between delayed execution and immediate, creative torment. Court records reveal case after case where pregnancy was used not as a mitigating factor, but as an opportunity for elaborate psychological warfare. Legal treatises by influential jurists provided theological justification for practices that would have shocked even their European contemporaries. Women in Ottoman society existed in a carefully controlled hierarchy where their primary value lay in their reproductive capacity. This created a cruel paradox. The very biological function that gave them worth also made them targets for the most sadistic forms of punishment. Religious scholars debated when the soul entered the fetus, not out of compassion, but to determine the precise moment when execution could proceed without theological complications. Picture a pregnant woman condemned to death, sitting in the dungeons beneath the Maiden's Tower. She counts each kick of her unborn child as both blessing and curse, each flutter of movement a reminder that she carries not just a child, but the timer on her own execution. The stone walls weep with moisture from the Bosphorus above, and rats scurry through the straw that serves as her only bedding. The legal principle of delaying execution until after childbirth created a unique form of psychological torture that Ottoman authorities refined into a dark art. Prison conditions for these women were deliberately calibrated, just comfortable enough to keep them alive, but miserable enough to serve as continuous punishment. If these stories from history's shadows have gripped you, consider subscribing to History Remains. Your support helps us illuminate these forgotten chapters and bring voice to those who suffered in silence. Each subscription allows us to dig deeper into the archives and share more untold stories that deserve to be remembered. The cruelty of this system reached its pinnacle in the mathematics of suffering that Ottoman authorities developed around pregnancy and execution. They employed experienced midwives to calculate pregnancy terms with the precision of accountants, determining not just when birth would occur, but when the condemned would be strong enough to endure their final punishment. Court records from Bursa in 1574 document the heartbreaking case of Fatma Hatun, condemned for adultery while 6 months pregnant. She gave birth in chains, nursed her child for 3 months while knowing exactly what awaited her, and was finally executed on a cold February morning as her baby cried from the arms of a reluctant relative. The mental anguish of bonding with a child while awaiting death created a torture more exquisite than any physical punishment. These mothers experienced the most profound human connection, the love between mother and child, while knowing it would be severed by violence. But for some women, even this grim mercy would be denied. In the shadow of the Blue Mosque, beneath the very earth where pilgrims prayed, lie the unmarked graves of women who were buried while their hearts still beat and their children still moved within them. The practice of live burial represented the absolute pinnacle of Ottoman cruelty, reserved for crimes considered so heinous that even death was insufficient punishment. Documentation preserved in imperial archives describes in chilling detail how pregnant women were subjected to this fate for crimes including adultery, apostasy combined with treason, and witchcraft resulting in deaths. The Chronicle of Mustafa Selanik'i, writing between 1563 and 1599, recorded numerous cases where pregnant women were buried alive. Noting the ritualistic precision with which these executions were carried out, the methodology of this horror was as systematic as it was terrifying. Execution grounds on Istanbul's outskirts featured specially constructed burial pits with sloping sides that allowed the condemned to see their fate approaching. Religious officials oversaw every aspect, from the reading of final rites to the symbolic throwing of the first handful of earth. Legal opinions issued by senior Islamic scholars provided theological justification by invoking the concept of corruption on earth, twisting religious authority to sanction unspeakable cruelty. European ambassadors provided eyewitness accounts that still chill the blood centuries later. The Venetian ambassador wrote in 1585 of witnessing a pregnant woman's live burial, describing how her muffled screams could be heard even after the earth covered her face. The condemned woman was required to listen to extended Quranic readings about divine justice and the punishment of sinners. She was given final opportunities to confess, though her words would change nothing about her fate. The symbolic throwing of earth was performed first by religious officials, then by court functionaries, and finally by members of the community who were forced to participate in this collective act. The gradual suffocation, the crushing weight of earth, the desperate attempts to breathe through soil, all while pregnant, created a horror that defied comprehension. Witnesses described hearing sounds of struggle continuing long after the grave was filled, sometimes for hours, as women fought against the inevitable with the desperate strength that only maternal protective instincts could provide. Yet the psychological torments designed to precede these physical punishments may have been even more devastating. Ottoman interrogation chambers exploited every aspect of maternal protective instincts with calculated precision. Interrogators threatened not just the physical well-being of the unborn child, but its spiritual fate, claiming the child would be born cursed or damned unless the mother confessed. Religious authorities were brought in to explain in graphic detail how the childless soul would suffer eternal torment. These sessions could last for hours, with pregnant women forced to endure descriptions of their unborn children as supposed spiritual anguish while their own bodies were racked with the physical stress of late pregnancy. Sleep deprivation became standard practice, with pregnant women kept awake for days while being questioned about their alleged crimes. The combination of pregnancy exhaustion and deliberate sleep deprivation created mental fragility that made false confessions almost inevitable. Records revealed that pregnant women were shown instruments of torture that would be used on their children if they were born before confessions were obtained. Women were forced to witness the punishment of other pregnant mothers, creating a cycle of trauma that amplified psychological pressure on each new victim. Mock execution ceremonies were performed, complete with all the rituals of real executions, stopping only at the final moment to offer one more chance for confession. Perhaps most chilling was how the Ottoman system transformed childbirth itself into an instrument of execution. Authorities developed a perverse interpretation of divine justice that viewed difficult labor as God's own verdict on the accused woman. When pregnant condemned women went into labor, medical assistance was deliberately withheld, with authorities claiming that intervention would interfere with divine will. This theological justification provided cover for what was essentially murder by medical negligence. Midwives were forbidden from providing assistance and threatened with their own punishment if they attempted to help. Court records show numerous cases of deaths during labor that were clearly the result of deliberate abandonment. The case of Hattis Hatton in 1612 exemplifies this cruelty. Court records show she was forced to give birth in the public square of Bursa, while suffering from complications that could have been easily resolved with basic medical intervention. Instead, religious officials stood by offering prayers while withholding the medical knowledge that could have saved her life. The miracle of birth was perverted into spectacle and execution. With the natural process of labor deliberately manipulated to maximize suffering, these practices created ripples of terror that extended far beyond their immediate victims. Children who survived carried trauma throughout their lives. Communities that witnessed these horrors developed a culture of fear and silence that suppressed women's voices across the entire empire. The unmarked graves scattered across former Ottoman territories stand as silent witnesses to a systematic campaign of cruelty that weaponized the most sacred aspects of human existence: pregnancy, childbirth, and maternal love. The dark machinery of Ottoman justice against pregnant women reveals how easily systems of power can corrupt the very concepts meant to protect the vulnerable. When law becomes divorced from mercy, when religious authority is twisted to justify cruelty, and when pregnancy transforms from protection into persecution, we witness the depths to which human systems can descend. These women's stories, preserved in dusty archives and unmarked graves, remind us that the price of justice without compassion is measured in the screams of those who suffered in silence, and in the generations who carried that trauma forward into an uncertain future. What strikes you most about how these women were treated? How do we ensure that systems of justice never again weaponize the most vulnerable aspects of human existence? Share your thoughts in the comments below.